Welcome to the Future of Travel, this panel discussion. My name is Dolores Semeraro. I'll be your moderator today, and I'm pleased to be joined by some of the most amazing hoteliers I've met in my hospitality career. And I'm very, very, very happy to meet David Rutnam for the first time. Welcome. I invite all the speakers to keep your microphone on mute when you're not speaking, so we avoid echo or disturbances. And I'd like to introduce you all one by one and have you say hi to the audience, which I'm sure today is buzzing. I can see the chat. We will be taking questions through the Q&A I'm having here, the Q&A list. So those who are listening to the panel today, do send your question on the Q&A, and I'll be checking them over the last 10-15 minutes of the panel. Obviously, the more interesting and juicy the conversation gets, the more questions we will be seeing coming through. So I'm excited about that. Our speakers today, David Rutnam, Regional Manager in charge of Europe at IATA. Welcome. It's a pleasure to meet you and to have you here.
Thank you, Dolores, and pleasure for me to be here as well. Thank you.
Thank you for connecting. We're all connecting from different parts of the world. I believe you are connecting from Spain.
I am indeed. I'm in Altea, in the province of Valencia, and yeah, lovely weather outside.
You're a lucky one. Yes, thank you. And moving on, we also are joined by ROCCO BOVA, CEO and founder of My Humble House, and a very, very experienced hotelier, and also a mindful one, I would say. Welcome, ROCCO.
Hello, good morning, everyone from Mexico. That's where I'm talking from. Pleasure to meet some old friends, including yourself, and some new one. Hopefully, we'll stay in touch for a very long time.
Thank you for showcasing those signature palm trees behind you. That look just awesome. Beautiful. Thank you so much for connecting at all time zones and time differences. I appreciate everybody's commitment. Louis Thompson, CEO and founder of Nomadic Resorts. Welcome.
Hi, Dolores. I'm here in Mauritius, not quite as sunny as normal, a little bit of a rainy day, but yeah, it's nice to be nice to participate.
I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about Nomadic Resorts concept, because it's an avant-garde concept that I believe will matter and does matter already, but in the future of travels conversations will have a special place. So we will be touching base on that especially. And Shaun Dünhofen, connecting from Thailand, beautiful Thailand, Koh Samui, General Manager of Nikki Beach, Koh Samui. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. And the tropical sunsets and the clean air looks forward to welcoming you back here soon. All the way from sunny Thailand.
I believe you're just reopening in Phuket with this sandbox planning. So the future looks bright.
That's correct. And we've had a few discussions only today with quite a few of the communities. So we're gearing up for it. So Koh Samui is right next door. So once Phuket opens up its doors, we look forward to welcome all our international guests back again.
Indeed. And even though we wanted to showcase these beautiful palm trees and tropical settings, just like ROCCO is doing, we actually are almost at the end of the afternoon in terms of time zone. So it's sunset time here. But let's get straight into our conversation today. I've been working on travel recovery and being sort of diving into the conversations across hospitality events, talking about how do we restart tourism. And despite the travel restrictions that are imposed by different government authorities and institutions, what we want to talk about is the traveler's perspective in restarting tourism, in how can we best serve that expectation of new normal when it comes to travel. Today on the panel, we have hospitality experts, tourism developer, designer. I know Luis is very much involved in designing the future of how hospitality accommodation look like. And David, you are hand-on connectivity and transportation, especially when it comes to flights. So I want to come to you with the very first point of how we will travel tomorrow. And it's true that with the travel restrictions, international travel restrictions, a lot of the travelers have preferred to travel domestically rather than internationally. But that has had also an impact on those who think that travel domestically is, unless you're living in a huge country, of course, but it's actually against, you know, the rules and the best intentions for our planet. So in your views, just to kickstart, let's break the ice of the panel. How we will travel in the future? What's your perspective?
Well, if we look at the immediate future, we're seeing that there's a lot of pent-up demand for travel internationally. And what we're seeing where countries are beginning to open up is that demand has really shot up. And there's three factors there. One is, of course, the vaccination rollout. So more and more people feel confident to travel, that they won't catch the virus. Secondly, people have built up savings during the lockdowns. They haven't been spending money, so a lot of people have savings. And thirdly, there is that pent-up demand because people want to travel. They've been restricted from traveling. They want to see family and friends. So what we will see, I think, at least in the short, medium term, is a lot of travel. It will be mainly leisure travel, I expect. Business travel will be suppressed for quite a while. And of course, I think on the previous panel, there was a discussion about working remotely, and we will see, I think, that will have an impact on a lot of business travel.
So what you're saying is that the travel confidence is rebuilding based on different factors. So whether it's health, reassurance, money, and time. So there are different decision factors that are dominating those choices. And when we look a little bit beyond, let's look at 2-3 years ahead, and how are we going to make these decisions? What will take our choices by then? We see that, of course, health and safety are major components of influencing these decision factors, but also quality of travel, meaning people are not necessarily looking for traveling more, but they're looking for traveling better. And what can we do, and what are we doing as industry leaders to help them travel better? So with this question, I'd like to have the insights of ROCCO, because obviously in your experience as a hotelier, you are directly in contact with you are the maker of the guest experience.
Well, thank you, Dolores, and good morning, everyone from Mexico again. Well, what I've been seeing recently, and particularly the past year and a half or so, is that guests are preferring smaller hotels. You know, that's a definitely prediction. I would say people lesser and lesser, they want to go into big box hotel with 600 or 1,000 people queuing up for check-in or queuing up for buffet. Even though if a food experience may not change, but the quantity, the size of these kind of hotels, I think the bigger hotels will, on the longer term, will start to probably be less, not disappear, because obviously there is a market for everything, but they will be lesser and lesser. Even investors, I feel, and I see even today happening in Mexico itself, for example, more and more boutique hotels are opening. I don't see 500 rooms hotel opening. Actually they're closing down more than opening. And the range of hotels that I see, or at least in this part of the world, they start in the 10 rooms and they go up to 200 rooms or less than 200 rooms. I mean, 200 rooms is not really a boutique hotel, at least not in my standard, but definitely that's what I see, is happening. The Americas generally, like maybe North Europe, was the birthplace of boutique hotels. So that's nothing new. But I'm sure Luis will tell us shortly much more about what he's doing. But the glamping business is exploding, not booming, exploding. It's a really huge wave that is coming everywhere.
You touched a very important point, and that is the well-being of travelers. Some of the recent trends and obviously data statistic, we are hungry for that, because we also navigate uncharted territories, of course, with all that has happened over the last 24 months. And we want to see what are the trends, what are the new statistics saying, what do the people want. And well-being travel has been on the high rise, and a lot of operators have sort of reinvented themselves trying to meet this demand, because it was the very first one that was detected as people started to travel again, even in the most unexpected places, like, for example, international airports, where the usual experience in a lounge or in a connective area, or even in the business or travel lounge of an airlines, was specifically redesigned to recreate sort of a well-being moment while in between destinations. So I want to go to David with that in a moment, but there is something about what Rocco said about spiritual travel that, in a way, to me, calls for Thailand. And Shaun, I'd like to have your views on whether you think, or you have seen, of course, in the destination, a demand for that, and how are travelers reacting to it? Are they re-embracing it? Are they rediscovering it? Or it was just there and nobody was talking about it?
Well, especially with spiritual travel, it's definitely a very open topic on lifestyle choices. And nowadays, the most important thing is choosing a destination that caters for that, but keeping in mind that, of course, the safety and the requirements that also follow that. So Koh Samui in general and Thailand has so much to offer for those that actually have traveled to Thailand and they've come to reinvent themselves through these practices. We've got a lot of health and wellness centers within Koh Samui, but we're also lucky that we've got the variety of hotels, as Rocco mentioned, from boutique to lifestyle, and even the larger hotels that cater for our guests, they've made it so comfortable that it feels like a home away from home. So people are ready to travel within the island because they know that there's a little bit of catering for each person. And one thing with every explorer that we've come across is you might enjoy the high energy of the beach club, but the social distancing of the area is important. But the fact is that even a lifestyle hotel caters not only for the quality and focusing on that health and well-being, which we all do. So from a community, when you talk spiritual, you not only look at it from a travel perspective, but also what have they brought to the table. We're lucky enough that the community is the network. So we've got a lot of different nationalities within our scope that portrays a wonderful positive image, and that's something that Koh Samui in general, what I can talk about, but also Thailand has opened its doors again, and that is something that is going to attract not only the natural well-being of people, which is important, but also that of people wanting to explore something in an area for a longer time. We used to have a shorter stay capacity. People would come in for 1 or 2 nights, and then people would focus on a different platform and explore something different. So now they can.
I think that, if anything, right now, with the quarantine restrictions imposed within the sandbox regulations, that you do have to have a lot of time if you want to go to Thailand and travel. Right, I think it's 14 days at the moment as they reopen the sandbox framework. But apart from the time, which is obviously a bit of a pain point for everybody right now, whether we're working from home or back at the office, or perhaps we have shifted completely our lifestyle. As we said before, we are reprioritizing our travel choices. And some factors are discouraging us from travel. Some others are motivating us to travel again. Luis, you've been involved in projects that have really spanned across a variety of tropical destinations. And I'm not just talking about any project. These are design-led, eco-sustainable projects that I'm not the expert, you are, but your project have been probably leading the way of many others that are now waking up to this new way of building hospitality, not just doing hospitality. What do you think right now, based on the projects that you've been built and the accommodations? They're all very particular in their own way. In fact, I encourage everybody to go and see Nomadic Resorts website and see what kind of project we're talking about. Completely avant-garde and beautiful. But the point is, we are building this type of new hospitality. How is the public responding to it?
Okay, so all right, there's a couple of different topics, and thank you very much for plugging Nomadic Resorts, Dolores. So much appreciated. But there are two interesting topics here. There's two different things that I think are both going through paradigm shifts in their own way. On the one hand, we have the Instagram generation, which is looking for what we call alternative lodging options. So if you look at booking.com or you look at TripAdvisor, there's been a huge increase in demand for what we call alternative lodging. And that could be a tree house, that could be a caravan, that could be or it could be a ryokan, or it could be an RV. All of these, that side of the business has actually got a significant boost from the COVID pandemic, really. So, sometimes it's just literally a physical reality. So if you take, for example, the increase in glamping facilities, it was a no-brainer, right? Because you've got the social distancing, you're in nature, people have been locked up for months and months. They want to do outdoor sports activities because they haven't been able to go to the gym. So there are a whole bunch of driving factors behind that, which have obviously influenced. It's basically given an adrenaline rush to the glamping sector, which was already, developing fairly healthily prior to the pandemic, but it basically has attracted now, institutional investment, which was not the case previously. So that's one interesting side of it. People going for tree houses, people going for domes, gypsy caravans, this kind of thing. And then the other thing that's interesting that you touched on, which is about the sustainability side of the discussion. And I think that this is somewhere where we're really going to see some quite radical shifts, actually. I think historically, the green hotel movement has been focused on incremental small adjustments to operating procedures to remove single-use plastics and get rid of the straws. And there's always some poor turtle with a whole bunch of straws stuck up its nose, looking very forlorn and unhappy. But
that lot of greenwashing that goes on and on and on.
That's right. And then a kind general manager sort of yanking the straw out or whatever. But no, what I think will be the next phase of this is actually the environmental message has historically been quite negative and depressing, really, right? We get repeated images of polar bears sort of trying to swim somewhere colder and better for polar bears. But what I think will be the next thing is something called basically rewilding. I think rewilding will be part of the hospitality sector. So instead of having, going somewhere to conserve the wildlife, I think it will be about regeneration.
It's interesting that you say the sort of the rewilding of the travel industry, the tourism and hospitality community, and also the operators, because with that comes also a responsibility of the transportation segment to connect those places. And in many cases, it's not as easy as we would expect. So yes, we want to go as far as possible, as isolated as possible, and seek that ultimate nature experience that it's serving us as travelers, explorers, well-being seekers. But at the end of the day, the wilder we need to go, the farther we need to go. So we need to be connected. We need to have that connectivity. And that's a bit of the other side of the coin when it comes to impact on planet. David, I'd like to have your views on how is the industry, especially the transportation industry, reacting to this trend?
Well, from IATA's perspective, we're very clearly looking at the environmental impact. We're looking to cut carbon emissions in the aviation sector. The problem we have, though, is that a lot of airlines have racked up hundreds of billions of debt over the pandemic. They are not going to have the funds to reinvest. Any surplus cash they have after the pandemic is going to have to be used to pay down that debt. So we really depend upon governments to incentivize, with things like the biofuels and other forms of energy, to incentivize and help the airlines in order to meet those. And there are obviously real concerns, and we obviously do need to address them. We recognize the impact that aviation has, and it's seriously taken, but the problem is going to be, where's the money going to come from? Dolores, I think
and not only where is the money going to come from, but where is the money going? And I see more and more travelers actually digging through websites and trying to avoid the easy booking solution, but actually looking at, okay, if I use this airline, does this airline has a sustainability plan? Are they offsetting their carbon emission? So it is a question that is on the rise, and it's actually becoming the normal. And I personally, as a consumer, receive plenty of newsletters, also because I'm curious. I always sign up for airlines newsletter to see what is communicating what. And a few airlines over the past 12 months have failed to communicate upon those new needs and new preferences. So in a way, we cannot ignore the conversation of the impact of travel on the planet. We have to be ready with the narrative that would sustain our choices as business operators, but also a narrative that is credible and authentic, because people are easy at spotting fakes, and we live in a hyper-connected world. So whatever is said online is easily checked. I actually saw one of the latest interviews of the new Director General at IATA, Willie Walsh. He really put it out as a mission of the association to really embrace it and to push those members that don't walk the talk, in a way.
I would agree with you, Dolores. And remember, it's a very, very competitive industry. We expected way more airlines to cease operations in 2020 than actually did. And that's mainly through a lot of government support. But there is a lot of competition. And as you say, the consumer will be able to choose which airlines do offer the kind of services they're looking for, particularly environmentally.
How does the industry view the change of having to navigate from leisure travel into business travel, and now business travel being completely taken off the table, considering also that a lot of people are working remotely? So by working remotely, they don't need to do business trips because they are operative everywhere. So who would like to take on this question? Yeah, go, Rocco.
Yeah, since I've been working actually in Mexico, believe it or not, since July last year, hotels, restaurants have been open in some form or shape. I since same time last year, in July 1st, when we reopened the hotel when I was in Yucatan, for example, the immediate response was booking. The first month was maybe a little bit quiet, but immediately August, September, actually from September last year to November last year, we were doing better than 2019. Imagine that. And we had a lot of guests traveling even with their kids, because they could log onto the website of the school, and they can do homeschooling from the hotel. So that was not really a major problem. But I'd like to hear Shaun as well, what's happening over there in Thailand.
Indeed. I would like Shaun to say something about, because Thailand is a remote working destination in high demand. And obviously, I mean, Thailand is your home, so you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well, happy to jump in. Lewis, I know you're about to point out a few things, but I'm happy to share a few things. I think that the business world has combined a lot into the leisure now. I've experienced it quite a bit with a lot of guests from Bangkok breaking away to Koh Samui, only because they haven't been able to travel home for the last year, or haven't made that journey yet. So they've been able to combine the two, and the business travel itself, it also gives a bit of peace of mind. So you can do your work and get it done in a short time, because you look outside and you see how beautiful it is, and you do the online with the kids, and at the same time you break away again. So for us, it's been a little bit more comfortable domestically wise from Bangkok to Koh Samui at stages when we have the airlines at play and we've got the good deals at place. But at the same time, we've always been very open to a lot of people working remotely. There's a lot of staycations and workations happening at the moment that has combined that. So people that, again, used to stay for only 2 days or 3 days now stay a week or a little bit longer. And they embrace that. So they're able to really and captivate not only their work scope and be more creative, because what happens when you step out the work environment, your mindset's open, you create something, and you might find a new idea or a new network of someone you might have just bumped into. But at the same stage, we have a lot of outside business travelers still waiting to come back into the country, and that scope of communication is something that we still undergoing, and that process, as it takes time, it gets a little bit more comfortable with the right people to guide you through the process. And that's the majority of where most things happen, is that there's a system to follow in order to come into the country again. But once that's adhered to and once everything is done, then you basically you get into the country and you enjoy it again and you explore. So once we go through all that protocol, and that flows over the next 3 months and 6 months, we gradually start to see that there will be a good business pickup overall, because people are wanting to travel, and they will combine their trips into not only a personal but a work holiday, because we all know to this day, even though we're on leave, we still jump on the odd email or two or the conference call, only to make sure, because everybody's working different time zones.
Yeah. This is absolutely not my sector, but something occurred to me the other day, and I thought I might share it with you. Okay, so let's say in a hypothetical world, there will be more video conferences and less face-to-face traditional conventions. Okay, I think we could probably safely say that that's a very high probability. In addition, I think a lot of companies will be reviewing their travel expenses in light of the way that their companies have been able to operate during the lockdown and the remote travel trend. My question is this, if there's less face-to-face conferences, if large business hotels are obviously technically much more difficult to do the social distancing regulations, often anchored in buffets and a food and beverage concept which is relatively high density, and the financial controllers of large companies are probably saying, well, we spent 75% less money on business travel in 2020, maybe this is not such a bad thing. Could it be possible that would create a shift in dynamic? So could the industry, a lot of the large hotel groups are basically landed with massive conference hotels and business hotels. If the business travel sector takes a massive whack, which I think we all pretty it's probably going to happen.
I think it is happening as we speak, in a way.
Could that create a shift in dynamic in the whole travel industry, where you suddenly find that Marriott or Accor have a whole bunch of distressed assets on their hands, and okay, obviously it's the owners who have the actual ownership of the assets, but in terms of their operating performance, I think it's going to be, it could cause a real shake-up, and I think that's probably not a very popular comment, but I think it could,
well,
cause some
I would
changes.
say from a hotelier point of view, and having been hotel-based myself for about 10 years in marketing communication, this is the time of the year where you do budget, and I see hotel companies just playing the Russian roulette and just going like, okay, what number do we put here? And then they pick, because there is very little visibility on the future of travel when it comes to this niche. But it all depends, I think, how do we go about it as operators? How do we adapt and become agile in the way we plan ahead, and also in the way we communicate? Because a lot of the perception that has been built around, the negative perception that has been built around travel and travel risks and all that comes with it, unfortunately, it has been media made. And a lot of what is said in the media becomes the universal truth, whilst instead it's always the best thing to do is to dig in and to seek truth, seek the real information that comes with the reality of traveling today. David, how much of that business travel has been cut out within the association? Because you guys are everywhere.
Yeah, so I don't have the number specific on business travel, but I can tell you that we're expecting by the end of 2021, there will be at about 55% revenues of 2019 pre-COVID, and that we're not expecting airlines to kind of turn profits until 2023. But you're absolutely right. Business travel has been hammered. I think conferences, though, won't go away, because remember, sitting online conferences is usually 2 hours max. Whereas, you've got the networking and of course you've got the whole day in a physical conference. So I think that'll recover. I think the kind of small meetings type of events that you can really do over Zoom or Teams or whatever, that will take longer to recover. And of course, remember, there's business travel associated with other things. So, maybe having to travel to do something physical. So that will continue. But I think the conferences will recover quickly, because a lot of even in the events that I'm involved in, they're desperate to move to a physical event rather than a remote event.
I'm curious to know on the panel, how much of your working routine is currently remote based, so home based, versus office based, so most except the building where the company is or the head office or things like that. I know, David, you are on leave these days, so thank you for taking the time to join the summit. But how is your working life looking like today? Are you working from home? Are you traveling? Are you hotel based? Are you full back on it? Shaun.
Well, I'm lucky enough that work is home. I live on the property.
Just to finish the round, ROCCO, you are also on property as well.
Yes, it's correct. I live on property, and I've been living on property since the past 4.5 years. So I know exactly what Shaun has to say.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And I leave you to the rest of your days. And thank you for coming in.